Hi, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on supply chain operations strategy. So, when we talk about a supply chain strategy, the supply chain strategy needs to be aligned with the organization's overall business strategy. So, from a business strategy perspective, we are also always looking to at the organization's long-term goals. We are considering all departments within the organization, and we are ensuring that that business strategy is aligned with the organization's mission and vision. From a supply chain strategy perspective, we are looking more at the operational area of an organization. We're looking at the logistics, we're looking at the manufacturing, we're looking at the day-to-day operations, okay, from an organization when we're talking about supply chain strategy. Now, we have to consider the overall business strategy because they need to be in alignment. And in order for those to be in alignment, we need to work with each department of the organization. Okay. And that begins with breaking down silos within the organization. So what I mean by that is that yes, the manufacturing department will or purchasing department will have their own agenda. They're focused on increasing efficiencies from an operational perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, from a purchasing perspective. Now, they also need to work hand in hand closely with those in finance, for example. Finance is going to approve the budgets so that they can implement their long-term strategies from a manufacturing, purchasing, logistics perspective. Okay, and all of these parties within the organization need to be on the same accord, need to be in agreement that this supply chain strategy is aligned with the long-term business strategy. It needs to be aligned with the long-term business growth of the organization. So whenever we talk about supply chain strategy, there are four primary building blocks from a supply chain perspective, and we talked about that operation strategy. And whenever we talk about the operation strategy, we're looking at the day-to-day processes and functions of an organization. Now, we say day-to-day, and then we also say strategy. We say short-term, and we say long-term. So how do those kind of click with each other? So if we are looking at the long-term strategy from an operations perspective, we're looking at how do my day-to-day processes, my improvement of my day-to-day processes lead to long-term growth for the organization. Right? So we need to strive for continuous improvement to increase those processes, which in turn will have lead to increased customer service levels. And with that growth will lead to expansion for the organization. With that expansion for the organization, we need to understand where we need to, are we going to expand on our current facility? Are we going to build a new facility? That leads into those day-to-day operational decisions, which goes into the long-term operational strategy for the organization. So we also have the building block of supply chain strategy with our sourcing strategy. Now, this sourcing strategy has been a topic of discussion during the pandemic of 2020, where the organizations in the US had a heavy reliance on Chinese suppliers. So a lot of companies, and there was one study that came out by one of the top supply chain organizations. It was a survey, and they surveyed a number of manufacturers, and over 60% of those manufacturers said that they are currently reevaluating their current supplier base, right? Because they were significantly impacted by the pandemic, because they could not receive products because their Chinese manufacturers shut down for a month. So they are looking for alternate suppliers within the US which goes into that long-term sourcing strategy. Right. So if you're in a organization, a product-based organization, you may see new suppliers come on in the coming months you may see more domestic suppliers coming in, I should say, in the coming months. But there may be a mix of Chinese manufacturers that remain, but you will see an increase in domestic suppliers to mitigate or buffer against a disruption such as the pandemic of 2020. So we also have a distribution strategy that we discuss when we talk about supply chain strategy, where we say, how are we going to be able to effectively service all of our customers, both domestically and internationally? Are we going to be able to service all of our global suppliers from a distribution center on the East Coast, in the Midwest, on the West Coast? Or do we have to have a distribution network to effectively service our customers? If we have a growing customer base in Europe, do we have to open up a distribution center in Europe? Or do we use a third-party distribution center in Europe? You know, those are the decisions that have to be made whenever you are looking at that supply chain strategy. If we talk about distribution, we cannot ignore Amazon, the Amazon effect. You can see that, you know, Amazon began as a bookseller, but they rose to one of the largest organizations in the world due to their supply chain strategy. They are able to service this one-day shipping to all customers around the country. I'm not sure about around the world, so I'll just stick with around the country because of their distribution network. They would have distribution centers almost in all 50 states. In some states, they have multiple distribution centers. I know here in Pennsylvania, Amazon has a number of distribution centers. And because they have that reach, you know, because they have that responsiveness, they're able to develop that competitive advantage that I could say, in my opinion, can't be duplicated. I don't think that Walmart could create a distribution network the size and as effective as Amazon. That's just my opinion. And I think that Walmart understands that, and they are staying with their core competency in that brick and mortar retail space, and do not really want to compete with Amazon on the e-commerce space, right? So we'll talk about those core competencies and how organizations are dealing with that, realizing their core competencies, and are kind of staying within that core competency. So, and to go into each one of these in more detail, I forgot the customer service management. So another supply chain strategy is customer service management. So we're going to talk about customer relationship management in this course, where we leverage technology to look at, to understand those customer buying behaviors, those customer patterns. We're also going to talk about the inclusion of artificial intelligence, one of my favorite topics to talk about. And when we talk about customer relationship management, I kind of compare it to Amazon. I compare it to Netflix. You know, how does Amazon and Netflix understand your behaviors? How does Amazon and Netflix understand what movies you like to watch? I mean, how does Netflix understand what movies you like to watch? How does Amazon know what products you may like to buy? They're using technologies such as artificial intelligence to find patterns, to find what we refer to as clustering, to get people previously who ordered what you ordered and make suggestions to you. Netflix uses clustering to look at the movies that people watch that you just watched and provide you with suggestions, right? So, I mean, the concept of artificial intelligence and machine learning is very simple in nature, in concept, but creating those algorithms are what provides the power. Okay, so we'll talk more about that, and that's what we're going to talk about when we talk about customer service management and customer relationship management. So very quickly, at a high level, from a supply chain strategy perspective with operations, we want to ensure that every process that we do adds value. When we talk about Lean and Six Sigma, we will talk about removing or eliminating non-value added activities. And if we have that approach, we are providing value, we are creating efficient processes within an organization, which will be a step toward operational excellence for the organization. And that's very important from a operation strategy perspective. And that's where those terms Lean and Six Sigma come into play. So with supply chain strategy from a sourcing perspective, that is essentially where we have those make versus buy discussions and decisions, and we talk about developing those strategic partnerships. So going back to our example, where organizations had to develop partnerships in a matter of weeks with the current pandemic, they are reevaluating their strategic partnerships with those overseas suppliers. You know, they're having those discussions as to what are those organizations' disaster recovery plans. What disaster recovery plans are in place in the event that something like this happens again? Now, although, and this will not be the last time I say this, but although this was a disruption that we have never experienced before, we experience cycles in terms of supply chain disruptions, in that yes, this one was on the extreme end, this was the black swan, but you know, we have those disruptions annually. We have earthquakes, we have hurricanes, we have tsunamis in some parts of the world. You know, so we have these disruptions. So those disaster recovery plans have to be in place to understand how are you going to continue to service your customers in the time of emergency. So from a distribution perspective, we talked about the importance of distribution. We talked about how Amazon became a market leader by developing that supply chain network. They have optimized their supply chain network. I always go back to whenever you type in your zip code into Amazon, how does Amazon know how long it's going to take? How long it's going to take to show up at your door? How does Amazon know how much shipping is going to be? In a matter of seconds, as soon as you type in your zip code. They have to know by typing in that, by optimizing their supply chain network and by building that into their ERP system, so that they can look to say, based on your zip code, what is the closest distribution center to your house, to your home address. And by doing that, they can know how long it's going to take. Then they know how much that shipping is going to be to your home as soon as you type in your zip code for that order. And then again, we're going to talk about customer relationship management in more detail. Again, that is the technology that is used to track customer interactions. It's also to track and be proactive in developing and maintaining those customer relationships. So that's what we talked about in terms of supply chain strategy. I know I went a little long on that one, but it's very important to develop that long-term plan from a supply chain perspective.